The rain had not stopped in 3 days. It drummed against the crooked rooftops of the forgotten village, soaking the weeds that pushed stubbornly through the cobblestone streets. Most houses stood empty, their windows boarded, their doors half-rotted. The few souls who remained rarely lit a lamp. Shadows were safer. Shadows were quieter. A single light, however, glowed in the distance. The tavern, though old and sagging, still breathed with a stubborn warmth. Inside, the hearth hissed with damp logs, filling the room with smoke and the faint scent of pine. Travelers seldom came here anymore. Only the desperate, the lost, or those chased by things they dared not name. At the far table sat an old man. His cloak clung to him like a shroud, dripping onto the floor. His face was weathered, but his eyes burned like fading embers. He motioned to the innkeeper with a trembling hand. "Another drink," he rasped, voice heavy with years and sorrow. The innkeeper, a tired woman with streaks of silver in her hair, poured without a word. Moments passed before the silence broke. "You've seen it, haven't you?" the old man whispered, his words quivering through the dim air. The innkeeper froze. Her hand lingered on the wooden cup. "I don't know what you mean." He leaned closer, his breath carrying the smell of earth and rain. "The tower," he said, his voice sharpening. "The one in the marsh. It isn't supposed to be there. Not anymore." The fire cracked. A gust of wind rattled the shutters. The innkeeper's gaze darted to the door as though afraid something might already be listening. "Don't speak of it," she hissed. Her tone was harsh, but her eyes betrayed fear. The old man smiled faintly, a smile that carried no warmth. "It speaks of itself, whether you wish it to or not." The tavern door creaked as the storm outside pressed against it, wind slipping through the cracks like ghostly fingers. The old man hunched over his cup, his back bent as though the years themselves had chained him. For a long moment, the only sounds were the hiss of wet logs in the hearth and the steady drip of rainwater from his cloak onto the wooden floor. The innkeeper finally broke the silence, though her voice was low, guarded. "Travelers speak of many things," she said, her eyes fixed on the crackling fire. "Most are lies told to stir fear or loosen coin from the pockets of fools." The old man chuckled, but it was not the laughter of someone amused. It was hollow, as though it had passed through a grave before reaching the air. "Do you think me a fool?" he asked. She did not answer. He leaned closer across the table, his face catching the glow of the flames. His skin was like parchment, stretched thin over sharp bones. His lips trembled as though each word fought to escape his mouth. "I have seen it. The tower," he murmured. "I walked the marsh myself. The waters rose to my knees, the mud tried to drag me under, and still I went. And there it was, where no stone should stand. A tower of blackened rock, taller than any tree, casting no reflection in the water. It watches. Even when you turn your back, it watches." The innkeeper's hand shook as she poured another cup. A single drop of wine spilled, rolling down her wrist. She drew in a sharp breath. "You speak like a cursed man," she said, barely above a whisper. "Best you leave those words outside my walls." The old man's eyes lifted, glowing faintly in the firelight. "Your walls won't keep it away. Nothing will." The tavern door groaned suddenly as the storm pressed harder, rattling it on its hinges. Both of them turned to look, and for a heartbeat, neither breathed. The sound was only the wind, but the silence afterward was heavier, as though the night itself had paused to listen. The innkeeper muttered a prayer under her breath. The old man drained his cup in a single swallow and slammed it down, his frail hand shaking. "Do you think the marsh remembers?" he asked. "The wars, the fires, the dead buried beneath it. Towers don't rise by accident. They rise where blood has been spilled. And that one, his voice cracked, that one rises because something beneath it has opened its eyes again. Her face went pale. She dropped the cup she was holding and it shattered on the floor. The tavern door creaked again, this time slowly, not from the wind. The innkeeper rushed forward, bolting it shut with trembling hands. Her eyes darted toward the shadows in the corners of the room. The fire seemed to shrink in its hearth, throwing less light as though it too feared the dark. When she turned back, the old man was staring at her, his expression grim. "You've heard it, haven't you?" he said. "In the night." The whisper. The innkeeper froze, her lips parting but no words coming. Her silence was answer enough. The old man leaned back in his chair, his voice dropping low, the words like a secret curse. "It doesn't whisper to everyone. Only those it calls." A long silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. The innkeeper backed away slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. Finally, she said, "Enough. Leave at dawn. I won't have that kind of talk here. My walls may not keep it away, but they will keep me sane." The old man smiled again, a smile that looked more like grief than joy. "You think sanity is what it wants," he whispered. "No. Sanity is the first thing it takes." The fire sputtered. The wind howled. And somewhere far across the marsh, though no door or window was open, a low, distant sound echoed through the night, like a bell tolling underwater. The innkeeper's eyes snapped wide. The old man closed his and bowed his head as though he had been waiting for it. The toll came again, and again, slow, hollow, calling. The old man whispered one final word, his voice trembling as if it carried the weight of 1,000 graves. "Awakening." The sound faded slowly, leaving the tavern in silence once more. The innkeeper pressed a hand to her chest, her breath uneven. The storm outside raged on, but compared to the tolling, its fury felt almost comforting. The old man did not move. His eyes remained closed, his face turned slightly toward the window as though listening for something no one else could hear. "3 nights, he said at last, his voice faint, hoarse. "It has been 3 nights since the bell first called to me, each time nearer, each time louder. Tonight it is clear. Soon," he trailed off, opening his eyes slowly, "soon it will not call. It will come." The innkeeper stepped back until her shoulders pressed against the wall. The wood was damp, chilled by the storm, but she barely noticed. "You speak madness," she whispered. "Old men's tales, curses told to frighten children." The old man turned his gaze upon her, and for a moment the firelight seemed to flicker inside his pupils. "I am no child," he said softly, "and I do not frighten easily. But I am afraid." His words hung in the air, heavier than smoke. The innkeeper shuddered. She glanced to the corner of the room where a small shrine stood, a simple carving of an angel, wings spread, worn smooth from years of prayer. Her lips trembled, though she did not speak. The old man followed her gaze and let out a hollow laugh. "Your angel has no power there, not in the marsh, not in the shadow of the tower." Her jaw clenched and she turned sharply toward him. "Enough," she said. "Drink, rest, and leave. I will not hear more." But her voice cracked, betraying her fear. The old man leaned back slowly, the chair creaking beneath his frail weight. His hand stroked his beard, wet with rainwater. "You wish not to hear," he murmured, "but it already whispers to you. At night in your dreams. Have you not woken with the taste of mud in your mouth, the sound of water lapping against stone? That is how it begins." Her lips parted and her hand trembled as it rose to her face. She wanted to deny it, to curse him, to call him liar, but the truth lingered in her silence. She had woken to those dreams many times. Before she could speak, the door rattled again. This time it was not the wind. The old man's head snapped toward it. The innkeeper's breath caught in her throat. The latch quivered as though a hand pressed against it from the other side. Then nothing. Only the hiss of rain, the moan of wind through the trees. Slowly, the innkeeper moved forward, her bare feet whispering across the wooden floor. She placed her hand on the latch and froze, listening. Her heart thudded so loud she feared the old man might hear it. The silence stretched long and brittle, and then a knock, not loud, not violent, a slow, deliberate knock, once, twice, thrice. The innkeeper staggered back, her hand flying from the latch. The old man rose from his chair with surprising strength for his age, his face pale but resolute. "Do not open it," he said sharply. She shook her head, whispering, Who would come in such weather?" He looked at her, his eyes filled with grim certainty. "No one you should welcome." The knocking ceased. A few moments passed, heavy with dread. Then, as though satisfied, the presence at the door withdrew. The storm once again claimed the night. The old man returned to his chair and sank into it, his breath heavy. "It begins," he muttered, almost to himself. The innkeeper pressed both hands against her face, her body trembling. "What does it want?" she asked, muffled behind her fingers. The old man looked at her, his eyes like fading embers. "It wants what it has always wanted," he said. "The living. The fearful, those who still dream."
The fire cracked loudly, as if protesting his words. Shadows leapt across the walls, and for the first time that night, the innkeeper wept. The storm raged without pause. Rain slashed across the marshlands like knives, drumming against the earth with ceaseless fury. The village slept restlessly, its few remaining inhabitants curled in silence behind shuttered windows, each of them whispering prayers that their names would not be spoken in the dark. But there was one soul who did not belong to this place. One soul who came despite the warnings. A traveler. He trudged along the muddy path, the hood of his cloak heavy with water, his boots sinking deep into the mire. Each step seemed to drag him lower, as though the marsh itself sought to claim him. Yet still he pressed on. His breath came heavy, visible in the cold night air, mingling with the mist that clung to the ground. The path narrowed, lined on either side by reeds that swayed unnaturally in the wind. Their thin stalks bent and twisted as though reaching for him. His hand tightened on the hilt of the blade at his hip, though he did not draw it. The marsh had eyes. He felt them, watching, waiting. Far ahead, dim through the rain, he saw the glow of the tavern's light. A fragile beacon, flickering in the distance, as though daring the darkness to snuff it out. Relief flickered across his weary features. Shelter, at last, but with relief came unease. For as he looked upon the tavern, he thought he saw something else behind it, farther in the marsh. Black, tall, and thin, as if a finger of stone pointed to the heavens. A tower. He blinked and it was gone. Only mist remained. His breath caught, but he forced himself onward, his boots dragging against the mud. The rain swallowed all other sound, leaving him alone with his heartbeat and the squelch of the earth beneath his steps. At last, he reached the tavern. He paused at the door, his hand lingering on the latch. From within, he heard muffled voices, one deep and worn, the other sharp with fear. He hesitated. He had no wish to intrude. And yet, there was something about those voices, something urgent, as though he was meant to hear them. He pushed open the door. The hinges cried out, and the storm roared louder before the door slammed shut behind him. Warmth greeted him, though faint, carried by the hearth fire that fought against the damp. Smoke coiled in the air. Shadows leaned across the room. Two pairs of eyes turned toward him. The innkeeper, her hands clenched tight before her, her face pale and wet with tears. And the old man, seated at the far table, his eyes burning faintly in the firelight. For a long moment, no one spoke. The crackle of the fire filled the silence, and the storm outside seemed to wait, listening. The traveler lowered his hood, water streaming down his shoulders. His face was young, but worn by hardship, his eyes shadowed with fatigue. He gave a polite bow, his voice steady though soft. "Forgive me," he said. "The storm, there was no other shelter." The innkeeper swallowed hard, nodding quickly. "You are welcome," she whispered, though her voice trembled. The old man studied him with quiet intensity, his gaze unblinking. The traveler stepped forward, his boots leaving trails of mud across the floor. He glanced between the two, sensing the tension thick in the room. "I hope I am not intruding." The innkeeper forced a smile, though it faltered. "No intrusion. Sit, rest. You look half drowned." But the old man leaned forward, his voice a low rasp. "You came from the marsh?" The traveler paused, meeting his eyes. "Yes, the path was long, but it led me here." The old man's lips trembled into the faintest of smiles. "Then you saw it." The traveler's brow furrowed. "Saw what?" The innkeeper hissed sharply. "Don't!" But the old man interrupted, his voice cutting through hers like a blade. "The tower." The traveler froze, his jaw tightened. His hand brushed against the hilt of his blade, though unconsciously. Slowly, he nodded. "I thought I did, but it vanished in the mist." The innkeeper's hand slammed against the counter. "Enough! I will not have this talk in my tavern. Not tonight, not ever." Her voice shook, her fear raw, but it was met only with silence. The storm howled, rattling the walls as though mocking her command. The traveler lowered his gaze, his voice quieter now. "What is it?" "That tower, it should not be there, should it?" The old man leaned closer, his breath ragged, his voice trembling with both fear and certainty. "It has returned. The marsh remembers. And now it calls to those who wander, to those who dream." The traveler's chest tightened. His nights had been restless of late, plagued by strange dreams, dark waters, voices that whispered beneath the surface of his thoughts. He had thought them merely weariness, the result of too many nights without proper rest. But now he shook his head. "What do you mean, returned? What is it?" The innkeeper's eyes filled with tears once more. She whispered, "A grave." "That tower is a grave." The traveler looked between them, confusion and dread knotting within him. "Whose grave?" The old man's eyes burned like embers, and he leaned forward, speaking so softly that the words seemed to crawl into the bones of all who heard them. "Not whose," he said. "What's?" The fire sputtered violently, sparks bursting into the air. Shadows leapt across the walls, twisting into shapes that should not be. The traveler felt his stomach turn. A coldness spread through the room, deeper than the storm, sharper than the wind. And then the bell tolled again. Low, hollow, distant, but closer than before. All three froze. The innkeeper clutched at the shrine in the corner, her lips forming prayers. The old man bowed his head, whispering words only he could hear. And the traveler, though his hand gripped his blade tightly, felt a shiver race down his spine. For in that sound, heavy and drowned in water, he heard something beyond death. Something that was calling his name. The bell faded, yet its echo lingered in their bones. For a long time, none of them spoke. Only the storm dared fill the silence. Rain lashed against the shutters, the wind clawed at the roof, but inside the tavern all was still and heavy as though the very air pressed down upon them. The innkeeper's lips moved in a whisper, though no sound emerged. She clutched the small wooden angel in her trembling hands, rocking faintly where she stood. Her eyes shone with desperate faith that had long since cracked beneath the weight of fear. The old man remained seated, but his head was bowed, his shoulders slumped. His hands gripped the table until his knuckles turned pale. He looked like a man who had carried too many winters, too many burdens, and now bore the heaviest of them all. Knowing what approached. And the traveler, he stood frozen near the door, the hilt of his sword tight in his hand, though he did not draw it. Steel could cut flesh, but the sound of that bell was not flesh. It was deeper, older. A thing that could not be slain with iron. At last, the traveler broke the silence. His voice was quiet, almost reverent. It knows we're here. The innkeeper flinched, her eyes darting toward him as though he had spoken a blasphemy. Do not give it voice, she hissed. Words are doors, doors you cannot close once opened. The old man lifted his head slowly. His eyes met the traveler, and for the first time, a glimmer of something passed between them, recognition or perhaps warning. She is right, he murmured. Do not name it, do not invite it. Even silence is safer than truth. The traveler frowned. Then what is left, to sit here and wait? The old man's lips trembled, but his gaze hardened. To listen, a log cracked in the hearth. Sparks leapt, died. The shadows crawled along the walls like restless serpents. The traveler forced himself to sit, lowering his sword hand at last. The chair groaned beneath his weight. He leaned forward, eyes narrowed, his voice low. Tell me, if I saw the tower, if I heard the bell, then I have been marked. Do not spare me with riddles. What hunts me? The innkeeper shook her head violently, covering her ears with her hands. Do not, I will not hear it again. But the old man's voice, though faint, cut through her protests. The tower was buried once. Long ago, when the wars ended and the marsh swallowed the dead. Thousands lay beneath the waters, soldiers, kings, innocents. Their blood fed the soil. Their screams lingered in the air. And from their grave, a tower rose. A monument of stone not carved by hands, but by grief itself. The traveler's breath quickened. His skin prickled as the old man's words seemed to seep into him, as though the marsh whispered them through cracked lips. They tried to tear it down, the old man continued. Priests, mages, men who claimed the favor of angels. They brought fire, holy water, sacred steel. But each stone they shattered grew again by dawn, and each man who raised a hand against it was taken. The innkeeper sobbed softly, her hands pressed to her face. Stop, she begged. Please stop. But the old man's voice grew steadier, as though the telling gave him strength. Generations passed. The tower sank, the marsh swallowed it. For 100 years, it slept beneath the mire, and we prayed it would never wake. But blood stirs blood. Death calls to death. Something beneath has opened its eyes once more, and so the tower rises again. The traveler's jaw tightened. And the bell, the old man's eyes darkened. The bell is not a call, it is a heartbeat. And each toll is stronger than the last. The traveler shuddered. His dreams, the endless water, the taste of mud, the whispers beneath the surface, all returned to him at once, pressing against his mind until his skin crawled. The innkeeper finally lowered her hands, her eyes wild. She pointed a trembling finger at the traveler. You should not be here. It calls to you. It calls to those who wander, those with open hearts. It will use you to walk where it cannot. Her words struck him like a blade. He rose to his feet, anger flashing across his face, though it was laced with fear. I came seeking shelter, nothing more. Do not curse me with your fears. But the old man stood as well, his frail body trembling with the effort, his voice sharp as he rasped. Do not lie to yourself. You came because it drew you here. The tavern door rattled violently. All three froze, the latch quivered. The wood groaned, bowing inward as though something pressed against it from the other side. Then, silence. The storm itself had hushed. The wind no longer howled. The rain no longer lashed. The world had gone still. The traveler's hand flew once more to his sword. The innkeeper clutched her angel until her knuckles bled. The old man simply closed his eyes, as though awaiting what must come. And then they heard it. Not a knock, not a toll, a whisper. Seeping through the cracks of the door, threading through the wood, curling into the room like smoke. A voice, wet and hollow, speaking not in words but in the shape of hunger. The traveler's blood ran cold. He heard it inside his mind, his name stretched across the silence. The innkeeper collapsed to her knees, weeping. "It is here," she gasped. "The marsh walks." The old man opened his eyes, their ember glow burning brighter. "No," he whispered. "Not yet." "Not fully, but soon." The whisper faded. The storm returned, crashing against the tavern as though nothing had passed. The three of them stood in silence, shaken, broken. At last, the traveler spoke, his voice raw. "If the tower has risen, if this thing has awakened, then what can be done?" The old man looked at him long, his expression one of sorrow and inevitability. "It must be seen, with your own eyes. The tower does not show itself to all, only to those it calls. If you have seen it once, you will see it again, and you must go." The traveler's heart pounded. "Go into the marsh?" The innkeeper's scream cut through the room. "No, he cannot." "None who enter return?" The old man turned to her, his face hollow, yet resolute. "Better he goes now, while he is called, than wait until it comes here to claim him." The tower does not wait forever. The traveler stood still, caught between dread and duty. He had wandered far in his life, seen many strange things, but never had he felt the pull of something older than the bones of the earth itself. And now, he knew, he would have no rest, no peace, until he stood before the tower once more. The bell tolled again, closer, and the chapter closed with silence between them. The dawn never came, or at least it felt that way. The storm smothered the sky, dragging thick clouds across the heavens until the world seemed trapped in a twilight that would never lift. The air hung heavy, wet with the scent of moss and rot. The tavern stood as a lonely island of flickering firelight against the endless gray. The traveler had not slept. He sat near the hearth, his sword across his lap, the warmth of the fire barely touching the cold that had sunk into his bones. Every time his eyes closed, he heard it, the bell, tolling deep within his skull. Each time louder, closer, like a heartbeat growing restless. The old man dozed in his chair, though his slumber looked more like death than rest. His breathing was shallow, his hands trembling even in sleep. The innkeeper moved about the room quietly, sweeping the broken cup from the night before, refilling the hearth with new logs, though her movements lacked their usual rhythm. She kept glancing to the door as if she expected it to open at any moment. At last, she set down her broom and turned to the traveler. "You mean to go," she said softly. The traveler looked up. His eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, but their fire had not dimmed. He nodded once. "If I stay, it will come for me here. If I go, perhaps I can face it on my own terms." The innkeeper shook her head, her lips pressed into a tight line. "You do not know the marsh. It swallows men. Paths change. Waters rise where they were not the day before. You'll lose yourself before you reach the tower." The traveler lifted his blade, examining its edge. "Better to lose myself seeking truth than to sit here waiting for it to find me." Her hand trembled at her side. "You speak like a fool." But her eyes betrayed something else. Not anger, sorrow. She had seen others walk into the marsh. None had returned. The old man stirred then, his voice breaking the silence like the crack of dry wood. He must go. Both turned to him. He sat upright now, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. His voice was weak, yet steady. "The tower has chosen him. It will not be denied. If he stays, it will tear this place apart to reach him. If he goes, perhaps the rest of us will see another day." The innkeeper's face twisted, torn between fear and fury. "And if it takes him, what then?" Another soul lost to the mire, another voice silenced beneath the mud. The old man's gaze dropped, his hands clenched upon the table. It is already too late for him. Better to meet it willingly than to be dragged screaming. The traveler rose slowly, pulling his cloak about his shoulders. He strapped his blade at his side and slung his pack over his back. His movements were calm, deliberate, but his heart thundered in his chest. He could feel the marsh calling him, each beat of the bell dragging him closer. The innkeeper moved suddenly, rushing to him, her hands clutching his arm. "Please," she begged. Do not go, stay. We will pray, we will hide, we will. He placed his hand gently over hers, meeting her eyes. His voice was quiet but unshakable. You know it will not listen to prayers. And hiding only buys time. I cannot live in fear, not anymore. Tears welled in her eyes, but she let go. She turned away, covering her face as she wept. The old man rose unsteadily to his feet, leaning heavily on the table for support. He pulled something from beneath his cloak, a pendant of tarnished silver, shaped like a circle bound in thorns. He pressed it into the traveler's hand. This will not protect you, he said, but it may remind you of who you are. When the whispers grow loud, when the mud pulls at your soul, hold it tight. Remember yourself. The traveler closed his fingers around it. The metal was cold but solid. He bowed his head. Thank you. The old man smiled faintly, a sad, weary smile. Do not thank me. Survive if you can. The traveler turned then, moving to the door. His hand lingered on the latch, his heart heavy. He looked once more at the innkeeper. She stood near the hearth, her face hidden in her hands. He longed to say something to comfort her, but no words would come. He opened the door. The storm greeted him at once, rain lashing across his face, wind tearing at his cloak. The marsh stretched before him, endless gray water, reeds swaying like mourners, mists curling along the ground. He stepped out. The door closed behind him with a heavy thud, and the light of the tavern vanished from his back. The marsh consumed him. The path was little more than a strip of mud, winding between pools of black water that reflected nothing of the sky. The reeds hissed with the breath of the wind, bending as though to whisper secrets to one another. Frogs croaked, their voices strange and distorted, as though echoing from far below the surface. Each step was a battle. The mud clung to his boots, sucking at them, trying to drag him deeper. The water lapped at the path, rising higher with each turn. More than once he slipped, catching himself before falling into the stagnant pools. The air grew colder as he pressed on, his breath fogging before him. The mist thickened, coiling around his legs, creeping up his body, until the world shrank to a circle no wider than 10 paces. Beyond that, only shadow, only silence. And yet he felt it. Eyes, watching, something beneath the water. Something that never blinked. The bell tolled again, closer now, heavy. It vibrated in his chest, rattled his teeth, pressed against his skull. He staggered, clutching his head, his knees sinking into the mud. The sound was not only heard, it was felt, like a hand pressing against his heart, squeezing, testing. He gasped, forcing himself upright, stumbling forward. Each step felt heavier, as though the marsh itself resisted him. Then he saw it, far ahead through the mist, dark, tall, silent, the tower. It rose from the water like a jagged spear, its stones black and slick with moss, its windows hollow gashes in its face. It leaned ever so slightly, as though the marsh had tried to pull it down but failed. No reflection rippled in the water around it. The traveler's breath caught in his throat. His chest tightened. His fingers closed around the pendant the old man had given him, gripping it until it cut into his palm. The bell tolled again, this time from inside the tower. The sound spread across the marsh like a wave. The water rippled, the reeds bent. The mist swirled, and from the pools around him, shapes began to rise. Pale, thin, drowned things, their eyes empty sockets, their mouths filled with mud. Their fingers stretched long, dripping with water as they reached for him. The traveler drew his sword. The marsh had awakened, and it had seen him. The traveler's breath misted before him as he faced the shapes rising from the pools. The marsh water streamed down their pale bodies in ribbons, as if the swamp itself refused to let them go. Their limbs were stiff, jerking with unnatural motions, yet they pressed forward with terrible certainty. The nearest one emerged fully from the black water, a woman's form, her hair tangled with reeds, her jaw unhinged at a grotesque angle. Her hollow sockets dripped mud, and yet she saw him. She moved with the inevitability of a tide, each step sucking at the earth as though she were still bound to the swamp that birthed her. The traveler raised his sword. Its steel glinted weakly in the dim light, dulled by the mist, yet steady in his grip. He had fought men before, soldiers, thieves, beasts of the wild, but never this. Never the dead that did not stay buried. He whispered to himself, his voice steadying his hand. Steel is still steel. Flesh is still flesh. But as the first drowned thing lunged, he realized the lie. Her body hit his blade, but there was no cry of pain, no spurt of blood. The steel sliced through her shoulder and caught in her bone, but she did not falter. Her head turned toward him, jaw yawning wider, and from her mouth spilled not breath, but a stream of stagnant water. It splashed across his chest, cold as the grave. He shoved her back with all his strength, wrenching his blade free. She stumbled into the mud, but did not fall. Already, another figure was rising from behind her. A soldier this time, his rusted armor fused to his skin, barnacles clinging to the plates. His sword, broken at the tip, dragged a trail in the water as he lurched forward. The traveler's heart hammered. His lungs burned. The bell tolled again, louder now, resonating through the hollow tower that loomed over them. The sound shook the reeds, rippled the water, and each drowned thing twitched in unison, as though guided by its rhythm. The traveler swung again, his blade cleaving through the soldier's arm. It fell into the water with a splash, but the soldier did not falter. He simply kept coming, his other arm swinging the broken sword in a clumsy, relentless arc. Steel met steel with a screech. Sparks hissed into the rain. The traveler staggered back, boots sinking deep into the muck. Too many. There were too many. The mist thickened, swirling around him like a living thing. Shapes moved within it, more drowned rising from their watery graves, their pale faces turning toward him. The traveler's breath quickened, his chest tightened. Panic threatened to break him. Then in his palm he felt the pendant. Cold, solid, real. He clenched it tight, his knuckles white. The old man's words whispered through his memory, "Remember yourself." He steadied his breath. His fear dulled, if only slightly, sharpened into resolve. His blade rose again, catching what little light there was. "Come then," he growled through gritted teeth. "If the swamp wants me, let it earn me." He surged forward, his sword slashing through the reeds, through pale flesh, through mud and water alike. The drowned pressed on from all sides, but he did not retreat. Each strike was heavy, desperate, but fueled by the stubborn will to live. The bell tolled again. The drowned froze. Every single one stopped mid-motion, their heads turning in perfect unison toward the tower. Their mouths opened wide, streams of water spilling out, mingling with the rain. The traveler staggered, chest heaving, his blade dripping with filth. He looked past them to the tower. The door at its base had opened. No hand touched it. No figure stood there. It simply yawned wide, a wound in the stone, blacker than any shadow the world had ever known. From within, the bell's echo still rolled, though no ropes swung, no clapper moved. The drowned began to walk. Not toward him, but past him. Into the tower. One by one, they slipped through the door, vanishing into the void. The soldier dragged his broken sword behind him, the woman's jaw still unhinged as she spilled her stream of water. Others followed, dozens of them, their forms dissolving into the black. The traveler stood frozen, blade in hand, watching as the marsh emptied itself into the tower. And then, silence. The last drowned figure slipped through the doorway. The marsh grew still. The water no longer rippled. The reeds no longer swayed. The mist curled low, hushed as though holding its breath. The traveler's chest rose and fell with ragged gasps. His arm trembled from the weight of his sword. He should have fled. He should have turned back, sought the safety of the tavern, prayed the storm would hide him. But his eyes remained fixed on the tower. The door was still open, and something inside was waiting. He stepped forward. Once. Twice. each footfall sinking deeper into the mire. The pendant burned cold in his hand, but it no longer felt like comfort. It felt like a chain, a reminder that he had no choice. The tower called him. The bell tolled again, closer now. Not distant, not hollow. It was inside his skull. His knees buckled. He fell into the mud, his hands sinking deep into the filth. Water flooded his mouth, bitter and cold. He choked, coughing, but even as he spat it out, he felt it linger in his lungs, as though the marsh itself had taken root in him. Whispers rose from the mist. Voices. Dozens, hundreds, speaking all at once, yet in perfect rhythm. Some laughed, some wept, some begged. Their words tangled, incomprehensible, yet all carried the same weight. Come inside. The traveler pushed himself to his feet. His body trembled, but he stood. Step by step, he approached the tower. The doorway yawned wider as he neared, though the stones did not move. The blackness within shifted, not empty, but full of something vast and patient. He reached the threshold. The air here was colder than death. His breath froze in his throat. His heart pounded so violently he thought it might burst. His blade shook in his hand, and yet he stepped inside. The darkness swallowed him. The door closed without a sound. The traveler turned, pressing his hand against the stone, but there was nothing. No latch, no seam, no crack of light. Only a wall as smooth and black as glass, drinking in the faint glow of his lantern. He was trapped. The air was different here. Colder, thinner, as though the tower itself breathed in and out around him. His breath fogged in the lantern's glow, vanishing into shadows that seemed too deep, too vast, for the small chamber he now stood in. The floor was slick with moss and damp stone, sloping downward, though the tower had appeared to rise above the marsh. The traveler frowned, unease crawling across his skin. Had he stepped down into the earth or up into the sky? Already he could not tell. The silence was unbearable. It pressed against his ears until he swore he heard the rush of his own blood like a drumbeat. He raised the lantern higher, its flame guttering, and for the first time he saw them. Stairs. A spiral staircase descending into the dark. The steps were narrow, uneven, carved from the same black stone as the walls. Water trickled down their edges, dripping in slow, deliberate rhythm into the abyss below. The traveler gripped the pendant in his hand until its edges bit into his flesh. He whispered, voice cracking in the silence, "Remember yourself," and he began to descend. The stairs wound endlessly, each turn identical to the last. The traveler's boots echoed faintly against the stone, though the sound seemed swallowed as soon as it left him. The lantern's flame flickered low, barely illuminating more than a few steps ahead. The deeper he went, the colder the air became. His breath grew ragged, his fingers numb, his body heavy. Shadows clung to him like wet cloth. Then he heard it, a footstep, not his own. It came from below, soft but distinct, echoing up the spiral. His breath caught in his throat. He froze, straining to listen. The silence returned, thick and absolute. He took another step, and another. The sound returned. One step, then another, always just below him, always matching his pace. The traveler's grip tightened on his sword hilt. His chest rose and fell quickly, though he tried to steady it. He whispered again, "Remember yourself," as though the words might anchor him against the tower's tricks. But the steps continued. Round and round, down and down. The flame of his lantern guttered with each turn, shadows stretching long across the walls. And then the stairs ended. The traveler nearly stumbled as his foot struck flat ground. The staircase opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. The lantern's glow spread wider here, revealing rows upon rows of stone pillars, each carved with runes long since worn smooth by water and time. Between the pillars, the floor was not stone, but shallow pools of dark water that rippled with every breath of air. And in the center, a bell. Suspended from chains that vanished into the shadows above, the bell was massive, its surface cracked, its metal darkened with age. It swayed gently, though no wind touched it, and as it moved, the sound trembled in his bones. The traveler's knees weakened. His lantern shook in his hand. He had heard the bell from the marsh, distant and drowned. But here, so close, its presence was suffocating. Whispers seeped from its cracks. Countless voices, layered atop one another, murmuring in tones both familiar and strange. Men, women, children, laughing, crying, screaming, singing. Their words tangled until they became one endless sound. The traveler staggered forward, unable to resist. His eyes fixed on the bell, his chest tightening as though pulled by invisible strings. And then he saw them, figures bound to the pillars. At first he thought them statues, their bodies pale and still, their arms stretched above their heads as chains dug into their wrists. But as his lantern passed, he saw their chests rise, saw their lips move, whispering words too faint to hear. Their eyes opened, milky and blind, yet fixed on him. The drowned, not gone, not free. Drawn here, bound to the tower's heart.